you sit in the middle.
All right.
Be the fancy one.
Thanks.
How's everybody doing? We all right? Wszystko w porządku? Możemy to po polsku, nie? Nie? Chyba nie. Okay, so I'm John, this is Eva, and Robert, why don't you guys go through, discuss who you guys are, because these are some amazing people who are doing some amazing thinking in the blockchain space.
Thanks.
And I'm a crotchety old man who's going to make fun of everything, so it's going to be a wonderful back and forth. So why don't you start?
Yes, very warm welcome. My name is Eva Micheler. I am a lawyer. I teach at the London School of Economics at the Law Department, and I'm here today not because I'm particularly involved in fintech, but my involvement started by looking at the way securities are held. So you heard a lot about payment system in the immediate previous presentation. And what I've been looking at for almost 20 years now is the way securities are held. And what has happened there is we have a situation where there is central registers in most countries, and people don't connect directly to those, certainly not for international transactions. So in the last 10, perhaps 15 years, networks of intermediaries, in the form of custodians, have inserted themselves between the people who hold assets and the issuers. And my work is on understanding the legal risk that this infrastructure creates. So I focus on what kind of legal problems are associated with indirect holding structures. And so to illustrate what, for example, happens, there was a German investor who held shares in a British registered company, and when they were restructuring, he wasn't able to exercise his rights because he wasn't recognized as a shareholder. And that destroyed value for him. And this is a situation where you see that the infrastructure itself is inefficient. It is efficient as between the intermediaries, but the risk that is located in that infrastructure falls on investors. And this is how I came into looking at what are the alternatives and how can the current discussion and the hype about distributed ledgers and blockchains change this. And from my perspective, it seems like this would be there is a possibility that something like a distributed technology emerges, which allows investors to connect to assets across border without the help of intermediaries. So there's a sort of technology possibility. This then led me to the second question, and that is, will that happen? Who should drive that change? And you all here in the room will know that intermediaries are very keen to look at sort of adopting blockchain technology, and there's consortia of banks and other intermediaries that are looking into it. My view on this is that this is unlikely to go somewhere very soon because of the divergent interests of those who are trying to develop this. So it's a vain hope that incumbent intermediaries are going to be interested to embrace that technology because it goes against their business model. So I'm not pessimistic for the consortia that are right now out there trying to develop technology between them. Where I think the inroad is by targeting, so for the people here who are developing something, who you should be targeting are pension fund trustees, asset managers, people who actually hold and control assets. And I think, and that's now difficult to predict what's going to happen, but my view is that a change, if it happens, needs to be driven from the asset holder side. So for those of you interested in driving change, who you need to speak to are the very big fund managers and understand how they view the problem and what kind of solution they would be interested in. So that's my take on, I look at the market infrastructure, explaining it, understanding what the current possibility tells us about the infrastructure we have now, and perhaps understanding what the future can hold.
So you're coming at this from a very specific point of view and a very specific entry point for the use of blockchain.
Yeah.
Okay. So why don't you go for your spiel?
Sure. So my name is Rob Learney. I'm a researcher at Imperial College London, and I'm the Associate Director for the Centre for Cryptocurrency Research and Engineering. So this all started about 3 years ago when Bitcoin's price first spiked. I'd heard about it in about 2011, and I wondered about putting $100 in, and I probably wouldn't be sitting here now if I had put $100 in back in 2011. But it went off the radar, and then it came back with force, and I said, come on, I'm at a top university, someone here has got to be doing research in this. And no one was. And so I partnered up with one of the professors at the Department of Computing, who himself had heard about it before and not invested. Anyway, we started running some student projects in this space and generating proof of concept systems, because that's what computing students are very good at doing. You give them 6 months' time, you give them a good project, and the top ones will just click and get it, and they'll run with it and give you some very good proof of concept work at the end of it. So I'm here at a conference on fintech, and my personal background is as a medical doctor, and I've never worked in fintech before, so what can I tell you about fintech? Bitcoin itself is fintech. It is financial technology at the base layer. It's bringing disparate parties together, creating a network of trust between them when they've never met, they've never transacted before. That's what blockchain technology is, and Bitcoin was the first blockchain technology, which is why it gets confused, I think. The two get confused. What we've done is we kind of agreed internally in our department, you know, the big boys and girls have got this tied up. We're not going to be able to crack this open and do anything inside, make banks change the way that banking works, make insurers change the way insuring works. What we can do instead is add extra value by looking at projects on the outside of fintech, things like identity management services, things like using smart contracting mechanisms, so using automated payment systems to reduce costs for running local government services. We can look at microfinance and microinsurance and how you can create trading pools with multiple parties who've never met each other, but using this technology as a common rail, a common platform to get them to communicate. So we've not looked at fintech, the core heart of fintech. We've looked at the stuff on the outside instead. And I can give you some examples of those projects if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. So I think we're in a Star Trek situation. There's the boldly go where no man has gone before, the Enterprise sailing through space. And then there's something like the Borg, which is the all-encompassing creature that wants to take everything in. So you guys are suggesting that or blockchain itself, can sort of sail on from implementation to implementation, independent of these guys, independent of a fintech organization. Do you guys have IT teams that are looking at fintech? How many people are bankers? How many people are who just walked in here accidentally? Anybody bankers?
No one's admitting it.
No, IT guys? Okay, and out of the IT guys and ladies, how many of you guys are working on blockchain stuff? I think, did you raise your hand twice? Extra good. All right. So as we see here, the Borg hasn't noticed blockchain yet. So do we want the Borg to notice blockchain? Can blockchain survive the attack from these guys? And what does it mean for your research? And also in terms of regulation, how do we make sure that blockchain remains free, or does it need to remain free? Why don't you go first, Eva?
So what the regulator can do is the question. Well, the regulator is in a difficult position because the regulator is always a step behind. The regulator doesn't have the means to understand the technology. So the regulator, from my perspective, is loath to, doomed in many ways to fail. But if I was to give advice to a regulator, I think it would be wrong to shut down the technology. That would be, and it wouldn't work in the sense that because it's a globally usable technology, so shutting it down in one jurisdiction just pushes it elsewhere and then creates problem in the same jurisdiction that shuts it down. So from a regulator's perspective, facilitating this carefully is, I think, what I would advise. And I am optimistic that the regulators can pull this off. I mean, not tomorrow, but over time, technology has changed in financial markets several times over. So if you look at the way banking worked 50 years ago, we changed over to computers, and the regulators went with that. That changed the way they worked, and they it will be a sort of hit and miss. But we discussed this before.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a sort of conspiracy of the big boys against.
I do.
You do. I don't think so. I think it's a very natural reaction. What happens is we've got incumbent providers with a business model, and they don't want to give that up. And they are going to do whatever they can to stop it. But I wouldn't say that that's a conspiracy. I would just say this is how markets work. And you will find that over time, if this is superior technology, somebody will find a way to make it work.
So we've heard of stories of people who ran blockchain-based startup companies, and they were denied access to the traditional banking system to do their day-to-day banking. Oh, you're trading bitcoins, are you? Well, we're going to shut down your account. That provides friction. That certainly provides problems, and it's a way of them protecting themselves. They see it as an incomer, and they don't want to be submarined by this new technology that might break down their traditional barriers and their traditional revenue models. I would strongly urge regulators to be forward-thinking when it comes to blockchain technology. Bitcoin and blockchain is not just drugs and guns and child pornography. It's a far more interesting and amazingly revolutionary system that can change the way that disparate parties come to agree on a common fact, not just in fintech. And the other thing is that these technologies are fundamentally designed to evade shutdown. If you try to, I hate to do a Star Wars thing, but the stronger you grip it, the more it'll slip through your fingers. If you try to shut down the Bitcoins of the world, the more benign ones, where the whole blockchain is visible and you can track it and you can monitor who's doing what at what time, other ones will pop up. So there's one out there now called Monero. You cannot track activity on the blockchain. You cannot see who has moved money where and when. So you've shut down Bitcoin because you think it's a big bad, it's a big bad thing. Actually, there are others out there that are even more secretive. If you want to shut down people trading Bitcoins or people trading Ethereum because you're worried that they're going to use it for criminal activity or cross-border remittances that you've not permitted, well, they're just going to go and trade peer-to-peer. They're going to sit in a bar and they're going to swap bags and they're going to walk off. I'll give you a code on a piece of paper. That's your Ethereum. Thank you for the $50,000. This is what will happen if you push this underground. If instead you're enlightened and you're open and you say, actually, these have amazing power, and if we give back the network the power to self-regulate, so the police put their hand up and they say, by the way, miners, you've just mined a transaction that we think was used to fund this secret killing over in this country. If you tell the network, I think the networks will develop the power to self-regulate, and you'll see a better ecosystem evolving.
So do you think, Robert, we'll ask you this question first, do you think the current ecosystem, which is libertarian, mostly dudes who sit there and want to destroy the world banking system from the inside, do you think that whole idea, that whole dream of the blockchain will die and be replaced by the IT person sitting there and programming a blockchain personally for their own company?
The programming it for their own company is a little bit of a leading thing. I think that having multiple separate blockchains is not a solution. You all need to agree, and that's kind of the reason for it. But I do take the point that at the moment it is kind of seen as a little geek hobby, and it's a libertarian ideal. I think that has to go away, and it has to move into the real world, where people are now saying, actually, guys, there's better use for this stuff. There's more enlightened use for this stuff.
Well, it's certainly a very unusual situation where you've got a libertarian project that's then absorbed into the financial markets. Mm-hmm. That's an irony.
Yeah.
And it's sort of from a political theory perspective, it's a wonderful thing to sort of observe. But I don't see anything wrong with it. It
No.
provides, if it's good, it provides social value, and
Yeah. But
and
you get
I also don't think it destroys the libertarian idea, because it doesn't destroy anything. It just takes nothing away from anybody.
There are people who don't want these blockchains to be analyzable at all. There are people who want it to enable any financial activity that any human wants to carry out.
Well,
That may be a little bit too
But that's not a
extreme
very
for them.
libertarian approach. I mean, if the libertarian developed something wonderful, other people use it, why do they care?
So you're saying that the original creator shouldn't care how it's being used,
Yes,
or
especially if they, give it to the public.
but there's also plenty of arguments internally in the whole blockchain development world where this guy doesn't like this guy because this guy
Yeah.
wrote the wrong code,
Yeah.
quite literally. Like
Yeah.
he wrote the wrong comment somewhere, and they're angry at each other.
I mean,
Yeah.
Oppenheimer,
Yes,
atomic power. Oppenheimer famously regretted what he built.
Yeah, well, he built a bomb.
No, he
I mean, this is technically a bomb as well, because if all goes according to the Bitcoin plan, these guys are out of work in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's the idea. You strip those. So in your example, let's go back to your example of the German company buying stock in the British company with the 4 intermediaries who didn't know they were intermediaries of each other. If that was all recorded in an open system where everyone could then calculate the live risk of their transaction, would 2008 have happened? Would the world financial crisis have happened if we could all see what risk we were packaging?
2008 wasn't about infrastructure. 2008 was about people not understanding the products created by the issuer.
Yeah. So if this was no longer secret, if this was now visible to every party transacting within the economy.
Yes, but 2008 wasn't about people not understanding how they held. 2008 was about people not understanding what kind of risk the issuer sold.
Yep.
Even if it were transparent, presumably
So
2008
even
would
in a
still happen.
transparent environment, it would have happened
They would ignore it.
because the instruments that were sort of the assets that were repackaged were so complex that the people who bought it didn't really understand what they had.
But could a blockchain help in that situation?
No.
Okay. So let's run down a quick what does this all look like in 10 years?
Okay.
All right?
Good question.
Yeah. So we got a couple more minutes. I want to give you guys.
Well, I'm very hopeful.
You're very.
I think there's going to be some amazing things that come out in 10 years' time. Non-fintech. Let me talk about some of the other stuff we've been working on. So one example, local government services. We all produce waste. We all put it in a dustbin or multiple dustbins, and we all wait for them to get collected once every few days. We put it outside on the collection day, gets collected. What if your dustbin was smart? What if your dustbin was intelligent? And when it was full, it could report to the local government that it was full, and then that created a contract that garbage collectors in your area could live bid on. And so one garbage collector could say, okay, I'm going to take this route on Tuesdays, I'm going to take this one on Wednesdays. And then they come around, they collect your dustbin, the dustbin tells the network that it's being collected, and then that instantly satisfies a contract, and if it falls within the terms, the finances are released and the rubbish collector gets paid for fulfilling that smart contract.
Okay.
So
let's let Eva. So you're really into smart trash.
Smart trash.
Why don't you describe what you think the world's
So
going
there
to
are
like?
2 scenarios. One is it will change the way IT departments are run with the current infrastructure providers. And maybe some will lose and some will win, and we'll have the same thing we have now, just in a different context or with different tools. That's the pessimistic way. And the optimistic way would be that there is more transparency in markets. And which way it will go depends on the people who hold assets. And that is perhaps everybody in this room who, through some fund or through some pension system, holds asset and starts perhaps asking questions about which infrastructure providers do we use, how long is there a chain, how long is it, where's the risk, and if that is something people start taking an interest in, then we may have a different system.
All right, beautiful. So I wish we had double the time, because we could have really gotten this wound up, and we could have had like a, this side of the room could have fought this side of the room. And pretended they were
I
all
was
blockchain
expecting a
stuff.
fight. I mean, we were promised a fight.
I try to do a fight, but within the confines of this space, blood doesn't come out of this floor very well, and it's very slippery afterwards.
Yeah.
So there you have it. The blockchain, yay or nay, we've decided it's good for trash, and it's also good for it's also good for
Distributed
financial-
society.
Distributed society. All right, perfect. I think that's it. Thank you very much, guys.
All right,
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.